Again today the Gemara on the last line of Chavdaled Amud Beis. Hayu loy mois tumim. So the way the Gemara reads in front of us here, there's two gerses here, but the way the Gemara is written here, that this is going back on our Mishnah. The Mishnah spoke about a woman that took upon herself Naziris, but then her husband nullified her Naziris. So the karbanis that she set aside to be brought don't have to be brought anymore. So then the Mishnah said if she didn't set aside animals for karbanis, but there was money. And the Mishnah said, Hayu loy mois tumim, the money was tumim, meaning it was not spelled out what the money is going to be used for. Nazir has to bring three different types of karbanis, right? A chatas, a oila, and a shlamim. But if the money that was put aside, it wasn't specified what money is being used for what. Yiplu l'nedava. So that money, what's going to be with it? You just give it, it's dedicated to the Beis HaMikdash, and it'll be used for an nedava, it's like a donation, and they bring a carbon oila from this. Frag the Gemara, but how could you do this? How could you just dedicate it and then bring a carbon oila? Since part of this money has to be used for chatos, you have money that was supposed to be also for chatos that's included in this. And if so, chatos, the halacha by a chatos is that just like an animal chatos, that it can't be brought for a carbon, what did we say? Has to be left to die. Money that's dedicated for a chatas, what do you have to do with it? It has to be taken to the Yam HaMelach. You have to throw it out. So over here, this money, you know for a fact that a chelik of this money was dedicated with the purpose to be used for a chatas. So then why are we saying that you can then use it as an adava to bring a carbon oil of all of this money? Okay, so just to point out one thing, here, if you look back at the bottom of the Gemara again, before Amud Aleph, it says, Hayu loy mois tumim. Loy is referring to him, not to her. It's not. So according to Taisvis, according to Bachia brings a girsa as well, the Gemara is not asking this question on the case of our Mishnah over here, where it spoke about this woman that dedicated this carbon. It's asking this question on another Mishnah that the Gemara quoted before, which was a case that a person separated the carbonis of his Naziris and then he passed away. What's the difference? So Taisvis says that if you look in our Mishnah and you look in the Mishnah over there, it's not talking about the exact same case. Here it's talking about a woman that separated her karbanis, and when it says stumin in our Mishnah, she didn't specify at all what the money is. She just said, this money I put aside, I dedicate it, makdish it for my karbanis, or for my naziris. So it's lav dafka, there is actually any money of a chatas in there. The Gemara before said on Daf Chav Daled that when you put aside money and you don't specify what it is, in the end, she could decide to use all the money just for an oila, or just for a shlamim. And then the chatas that she has to bring as well, she'll bring additional money. So the Gemara can't ask a question on that included in this money, there's for sure also money used for a chatas. However, in the other Mishnah that was quoted before, maybe it was a Braise, regarding a case where a person dedicated money and then he passed away, I think that was the case. Taisus proved that in that Mishnah, when the person dedicated the money, even though it's mois stumin, meaning he didn't specify which money is for this carbon, which money is for that carbon, it's all just one pile of money. But he said, clearly, I am dedicating all this money for all the karbanis I have to bring for the chatas oil and shlamim. Not specified what part of money is for what, but still, he said for chatas oil and shlamim. So therefore, other than that, the Gemara is asking the question. So if so, there's definitely a chelik of the money that's for the chatos. So then how could you then say that if you can't use it anymore for the naziris because he passed away or he already got his kapara, that now you take that money and you use it in the Beis HaMikdash to bring a carbon oila from this? Rabbi Yechanan answers, halacha hi benazir. This is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that was said regarding a Nazir, that the money that was dedicated, and it was stam money, and even though it has a chatas in it, but if it can't be used for this, you leave it in the Beis HaMikdash, and it's brought then as a carbon oila. Special halacha l'Moshe Misinai. We'll see later on in the Gemara, it goes to Daf Chavav, over there the Gemara will say that this halacha l'Moshe Misinai is lav dafka regarding a Nazir. This halacha l'Moshe Misinai could apply also in other cases when it was dedicated, even though originally it had a chatas in it, but now if it can't be used for that, the halacha l'Moshe Misinai says that it's left as a donation and it's brought as an oila. Shlakish Amar. Shlakish says, no, you could actually learn this from a pasuk. Pasuk says, L'chol nidreyem or l'chol nidvaisam. What is this pasuk talking about? All your nidarim, all your vows, all your donations that you dedicate as a carbon, that pasuk there concludes and says, Asher yakrivu l'Hashem la'ila. It should be brought for the Eibishter as an oila. This is an extra pasuk. It's not talking about any specific carbon that a person is supposed to bring. It's just saying all your nidarim and all your nidavis should be brought as an oila. What is the Torah saying? HaTorah Amra, here, the Torah is telling you this halacha. Meiser neder yeheil nedava. When you have leftovers of a neder, that should be brought as a nedava for what? What kind of nedava? As the pasuk there says, as a carbon oila. So what kind of a leftovers of a neder is this pasuk talking about? So Taisus over here explains, if a person made a neder to bring a carbon oila and he has leftovers of that, obviously it's going to be brought as an oila. Or if he has leftovers of a shlamim, you would say it should be brought as a shlamim. That's not, the pasuk doesn't have to tell that to you. What the pasuk is saying is when you have leftovers of a neder, which is lavdafke, an oila, it's other karbanis, but those leftovers that cannot be used for those karbanis that they have to be used for should be brought now as an adava, as an oila, as the pasuk says, the oila. So what's the neder the pasuk's talking about? The neder of Nazirus. Nazirus is a neder that includes bringing karbanis. So this neder of Nazirus, the leftovers of it, has to be brought as an adava, as an oila. So there's a pasuk that says this. Fragt the Gemara, Bishlem Rabbi Yochanan Dama halachihi bin Nazir. Rabbi Yochanan says that this idea is halacha l'Moshe miSinai regarding a Nazir. So amtula hachi. Therefore, we say that stumin in this halacha l'Moshe miSinai was said only regarding monies that was dedicated for all the karbanis of a Nazir and was not specified what money is used for what. So regarding that, the halacha l'Moshe miSinai says that it's all brought now as an adava for a carbon oila. And mufarashin loy. But if it was specified clearly that this money is for the oila, this is for the chatas, this is for the shlamim, so then you can't bring it anymore all as an oila. The chatas has to be brought to the Yam HaMelech, has to be disposed of. But according to Rish Lakish, he's learning it from the pasuk that says l'chol nedreyem or l'chol nedvaisam, all your nedarim, all your nedavis, if it can't be brought for what it was intended to be brought, it's leftovers. So now what do you do with it? So the pasuk concludes and says that you kriv l'Hashem la'ila, bring it all for an oila. So my area is stumin. Why is that pasuk interpreted to be meaning only if there's money that was not specified what the money's for? Why shouldn't we interpret that pasuk even regarding money that's left over from your neder of Nazirus, and now it's just sitting there? It doesn't have to be brought for because you died or the person brought the kapara already. It doesn't have to be brought for anything. You should say regarding this pasuk as well, that now it has to be brought for an oila. What's the source of this distinction of stumin and mefurashin? Amarave, so Rav answers and says, no. When it comes to the leftovers of monies that was dedicated for these karbanis, and it was very clear what money is for what, so you have the money, for example, for a chatos. It was clear that you said that this money is for a chatos, that you can't say that leftover money is going to be brought as a carbon oil on the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Can't say this, because Kvar Paska Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, because Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, there's a brayse he already explained and learned this out from a different pasuk, that the leftovers of a chatos that can't be brought for a chatos will not be brought as a chatos. If it's an animal, it has to be left to die. If it's money, it has to be disposed of in the Yam HaMelech. So Rabbi Shmuel learned this out from a pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Rak kodashecha ashiyu lucha unudarecha. Only your kachim that you have and from your vows, that should be brought to the Beis HaMikdash. Right? The conclusion of that pasuk there, it says, Rak kodashecha ashiyu lucha unudarecha tiso vasa lamakim yishivcha Hashem. Pick it up and bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. So this is also an extra pasuk. What is this pasuk? Which karbanis is this pasuk coming to teach me? And it says the term rak. Rak always means an exclusion. Only this. Only these karbanis pick up and bring to the Beis HaMikdash. What is this pasuk coming to exclude? What it's saying is bevlade kochim. What happens if you have an animal dedicated as a carbon and the animal gives birth as a vlad? So what happens now with this baby? It's a leftover. You don't need it for your carbon. So what do you do with this vlad? Or ubitmurasam, when you have a carbon that you brought and you wanted to exchange, you said to yourself, instead of this animal bring the carbon, another animal should be the carbon, right? That's the concept of tmura. What happens when you want to do such a tmura, to exchange? The exchange doesn't take effect. Instead, the original animal is a carbon, and the exchange is also a carbon. So now this tmura is also sort of a leftover. You don't need it for your original carbon that you made a neder that you're going to bring. So hakasa medaber, that's what the Torah is speaking about. So basically, these leftovers of these karbanis, what does the pasuk say? Ma takanasan. What does it have to be done with them? Tisa uvasa elamakim, pick it up and bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, Hashivcha Hashem. And you bring it over there, and what happens over there? That the Gemara here, the Brayse will spell out. Let's see. So you bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what do you do with them over there? Yachol. So I would think Yalem leBeis HaBechira. Bring them to the Beis HaMikdash, and v'yimna mehem mayim umazim b'shvil shiyamusu. And there, once you bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, since these are karbanos that are leftovers, you don't need them for your neder that you're obligated to bring. So maybe bring it there, but then you can't bring it on the Mizbeach. Just leave it there to die. Don't let it eat and drink, and then it'll just die. Maybe that's what the Torah wants you to do. Talmud Laima, so the pasuk there continues and says, "Vasisa oiloisecha habasa v'hadam." That then your oilos should be brought, basar and dam should be brought as a carbon. Laim lecha, to tell you, kederech shatanoig ba'oila nahoig b'tmurasa. It's the same that you do with the actual original carbon oil that you have to bring. The tumura, the exchange, the other animal now that's left over, should also be brought as an oila. And the same, kederech shatanoig b'shlamim nahoig b'vladeim. Just like the carbon shlamim itself is brought on the mizbeach. So the vlad, if it gave birth, so now that baby also has to be brought as a carbon in the same way. Okay, but this is all true regarding an oila and a shlamim. Right? That's what it says there in the pasuk, oilei secha. So, and we say that the shlamim is the same thing. That's how the Gemara learns this out, that the oila and the shlamim have the same halacha, that if there's a leftovers of a oila and a shlamim, what happens? It also has to be brought on the mizbeach. Now, Yochayel, I would think, avlat chatos, the tumaras osham came. Now, what if you have a carbon chatos or an osham and there's a leftover of that carbon that does not have to be brought? Like in this example, a baby born or tumura, another animal that was exchanged, which also becomes kadosh like a carbon. So I would think that also has to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash on the mizbeach. Talmud loima rak. So therefore the Torah says rak kadoshecha. Rak is an exclusion. Only a oila and a shlamim, if there's leftovers of it, it also has to be brought in the mizbeach. By a chatas and an osham, though, I don't say this thing. So this is the drasha that we're learning out, that by a chatas and an asham, if there's leftovers, it cannot be brought in the mizbeach. So therefore that answers what we said before. That on one hand we have a pasuk that says, l'chol nidreyem, or l'chol nidvaisam, if you have leftovers of a neder and a dava, even if there's a chatas included in it, what do you do with that? It has to be brought as a carbon oila. Here the pasuk is saying rak. And the Braisa is giving you an example of a leftover of a chatas and an asham, and it's saying that it cannot be brought on the mizbeach. What's the difference? If it's money that was specified as a chatas and an asham, so because it's already specified to be a chatas and an asham, so that can't be brought on the mizbeach. It just has to be. That's the halacha always regarding a chatas that's a leftover. What happens with it? It has to be left to die. And the same thing with the money. The money has to be disposed of. But if it's a oila and a shlamim, or even if it's money that includes in it a chatas and an asham, but it was not specified, that the pasuk said before, l'chol nidreim, l'chol nidvaisam, that has to be brought on the mizbeach. Okay, let's continue the brayse. There's another opinion here. This is all divrei Rabbi Shmuel. This is Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Rabbi Kiva argues and he says, ein tzarech, you don't need this pasuk where it says rak to learn out from it that there's an exclusion that a chatas and an asham, if there's leftovers, it's not brought in the mizbeach. Kivi says areu aimer by a asham. The pasuk says, at least for an asham you don't need a pasuk, because there it says asham hu, it is an asham b'hav yasai yehei, that it remains, it is what it is, meaning that only the asham itself is an asham. But if there's any other leftovers of the asham that cannot be brought in the mizbeach because it's leftovers, it's not needed, and therefore it's not an asham. So it's learned out from what it says over there by carbon asham hu. Okay, but they're arguing on the source, but the point here is the same. You see, according to Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, the leftovers of a chatas and an asham cannot be brought in the mizbeach.
But it's interesting. Didn't we always learn that the chatas is more harbor, that we have to make sure that we take care of it, and the shlamim we don't take care of it?
Could be. Over here, there's this. Yeah, over here that once is leftovers of a chatas and an asham cannot be brought on the mizbeach. That's the limit of the pasuk here. Okay, let's see. Now the Gemara is going to explain every part of this brayse. Sagt the Gemara, Katani, we just learned in this brayse, speaking about the leftovers of an oil and a shlamim. So the brayse said, regarding an oil and a shlamim, I would think that bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, but you can't bring it on the mizbeach. You have to hold back, you should not drink and eat, and then it should just die. You can't use it for your own personal mundane use. You can't bring it on the mizbeach, so it has to be left to die. That's what I would think. And the Brayse said, Tamad Laimava, Sisa Ilesechem. No, the carbon oil, if there's leftovers of it, it does have to be brought on the mizbeach. Frag the Gemara, but why is this so? And here the Gemara introduces that really the source of everything that this Brayse says is really already learned out from a halacha l'Moshe Messina. The entire next Gemara that will explain this Brayse will be based on this point. Seemingly everything it says in this Brayse, it's learned from these psukim, we really know it. In other places, it always says that we know it from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's just a Kabbalah halacha l'Moshe Misinai without a psukim. So over here, the Gemara starts, and the Gemara asks, why are we saying this over there? Ha vlat chatas hu de gemirim ba misa. We always know that there's halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that any leftovers of a chatas, for example, the vlad, a baby from a chatas that does not have to be brought over as a carbon. No, there's many other examples of leftovers of a chatas, like we had before. The owner died, the owner already had a kapara. So what's halacha l'Moshe Misinai regarding the chatas that it has to be left to die? So the Gemara's question is, the halacha l'Moshe Misinai said that that's only true about a chatas, not about other karbanos though. The oila and the shlomim, if there's leftovers of it, it could be brought on the mizbeach. So what's the Braisa saying here? That I would have thought that the oila and the shlomim have to be left to die. We already know from halacha l'Moshe Misinai that that's only true about a chatas and not about the oila and the shlomim. So the Gemara answers, ilav kra, if not for the pasuk here, hava min, I would have thought as follows: Vlat chatas b'chol makom. When it comes to the leftovers to a baby that was born from a chatas, so that has to be left to die b'chol makom, anywhere, wherever it is. It's in your backyard. You have this animal that's a chatas and it can't be brought as a carbon. Just leave it there, or lock it up in a room. Don't give it to eat and drink, and it's left to die. It doesn't have to be brought to Yerushalayim, to the near the Beis Hamikdash. Vlade kochim. But then I would think when it comes to other kochim, oila and a shlomim, bebeis habechira, that the pasuk is saying tiso basa, you have to come and bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, and then there it has to be left to die. So yes, Taka, there was a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that said only the chatas has to be left to die, but maybe there's a difference. Maybe by the oila and shlomim it does have to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash, and there it's left to die. Interesting distinction that. But this is what I would have thought. So the halacha l'Moshe Misinai itself does not spell out that clearly that this concept of being left to die and it can't be brought on the mizbech does not apply to oila and shlomim. Maybe the halacha l'Moshe Misinai was only saying regarding a chatas that you leave it to die wherever it is, but the oila and shlomim is brought to the Beis Habechira, but then it's not brought on the mizbeach. So kamash malon delay. So therefore it says no, you don't. That this is not the case. The pasuk says vasisa oilesecha, that the carbon oila and shlomim has to be brought on the mizbeach. So that's a detail that was not clear from the halacha l'Moshe Misinai itself. Now, what does it say afterwards in the Braisa? Katani, the Braisa says, Yochel av vlad chatas and tmuras asham kain. I would think the leftovers of vlad of a chatas or the tmura of an asham, that it should be brought as a carbon on the mizbeach tamad loymar rak. So the Braisa says that I have this pasuk rak, an exclusion that only the oil and the shlamim, if there's leftovers, it's brought on the mizbeach, but not the chatas and the asham. Frek the Gemara lama likra. Why do we need this pasuk here? Again, the Gemara asks, Hilchase Gemirila. There's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that tells this to us. Vlad chatas lemisa. Any leftovers of a chatas, whether it's a vlad chatas or any other kinds of leftovers of a chatas, it's always left to die. So let's read this together again. Vlad chatas lemisa azil, that it goes to death. And so why do we need this pasuk here? That's how it's read. Okay, so the Gemara explains, no, there's still a chiddush in the pasuk here. Hachinami, you're right, we already have this halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and we don't need the halacha l'Moshe Misinai for the chatas. The main reason we need the pasuk here is not for the chatas, it's for the asham. By a asham, we don't have this halacha l'Moshe Misinai that it has to be left to die. L'asham udasa. But the Gemara asks, actually, there is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai regarding an asham as well. Asham nami hilchas gemirila. There's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that's always quoted regarding an asham as well, and the halacha l'Moshe Misinai was as follows: Kol she'ilu b'chatas mesa. Any time when there's a leftover of a chatas, and there the halacha is that the chatas is not needed, so it can't be brought anymore as a carbon, has to be left to die. But asham roya. When it comes to a carbon asham, leftovers of an asham is actually not left to die, but what you do with it is you allow it to graze until it gets a mum. Once it gets a mum, then you redeem it, and the money you get for this, you use the money to bring an oila. That's the halacha l'Moshe Misinai regarding a carbon asham. So we have a clear halacha l'Moshe Misinai both regarding the chatas and regarding the asham, that they are not brought themselves on the mizbeach, but it's either left to die by the chatas or left until it gets a mum and then you bring the money. So what do I need over here, this pasuk rak, to say that it's not brought on the mizbeach? Hello, so the Gemara answers a different answer. If it would have only been the halacha l'Moshe Messina that says that it's not brought as a carbon, I would say the hilchase, yes, it is a halacha l'Moshe Messina. And but if this person just goes ahead and brings it as a carbon anyways, even though it's not needed and it's not supposed to be brought, but loy l'chayev alev loy klum, he's not liable, he doesn't get any einish for this, he wasn't over on anything. The halacha l'Moshe Messina says that it does not have to be brought, it should not be brought, that's not what you do with it. But if he brings it, so then there's no chiyuv, he's not over on any mitzvah saseh or on any mitzvah loiseh, so b'diavad, once it's brought, it's brought. Kamash malon kra. Therefore, the pasuk over here says this word rak teaches me the makriv lei, that if he's going to take the leftovers of the chatas and the asham that's not needed for a carbon, and he does go ahead and brings it as a carbon, he was just over on a mitzvah saseh. Why is he over on a mitzvah saseh? Because when the pasuk speaks about the leftovers of an oila and a shlamim, there it says rak, only the leftovers of the oila and the shlamim bring as a carbon as well. So the rak is telling you only that and not the chatas and the asham. What's the rule? The rule is anytime you have a lav haba miklal asay, if you learn out from what essa that the Torah says that it's excluding another case and saying that in another case you should not do like this essa, that's an essa. The Torah is basically giving you a mitzvah saseh that means not to bring the leftovers of the chatas and asham on the mizbeach. So that's something I would not know from the halacha l'Moshe Messina. The halacha l'Moshe Messina is telling you what to do, but you wouldn't know that if you actually go ahead and bring it, you're over on a mitzvah saseh. But now with this rak, we have a new mitzvah saseh that it shouldn't. We learned out as an aseh here that it shouldn't be brought as the carbon. Okay, so this explains Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. The Gemara asks the same question on Rabbi Akiva and gives a different answer. Rabbi Akiva said it's learned from a different pasuk in the Braisa. Ein etzarech, you don't need the pasuk of rak to tell me that only the oil and shlomim when there's leftovers is brought on the mizbeach, but the chatas and asham when there's leftovers it's not. Harei oime asham hu. By the asham, the Torah says asham hu, then only the original asham. This is an asham, but not. If it's the leftovers is not hu bav yasa yehi. It says what it is, but not the leftovers. It's not brought on the mizbeach. So again, the Gemara asks the question: Lama likra? What do I need the pasuk for? Gemara gemiri law. We have halacha l'Moshe Messina. Kol shebechatas meisa. Anytime you have a carbon chatas that's left over, has to be left to die. So the Gemara again tries to answer ba'asham. Asham roya. But regarding the halacha of asham, that it's left to graze until it gets a mum, and then the money that you get for it, that you bring as an oila, that's the chiddush that we learned from the pasuk asham hu, that if it's leftovers, it can't be brought in the mizbeach. Fragt the Gemara. Hachanami. Second, how do you read this over here? This is part of the question. And again, kol shebechatas meisa. Right. So the Gemara is asking the question that regarding chatos has to be left to die. So the Gemara says hachanami. That over here as well. No, sorry, it all goes together. Okay, let me read this again. Kol shebechatas meisa ba'asham roya. So the Gemara is not. There's no two steps over here in the Gemara like before. Here the Gemara is putting it all together. The Gemara is saying whether it's a chatas, the halacha is meisa. If it's a asham, the halacha is roya. That has to be left to graze. Meaning that we know all of this already from halacha l'Moshe Messina. So you don't need this pasuk of asham hu to tell me that by a carbon asham it has to be left to graze. So the Gemara answers, Hachanami, you're right, we already have this halacha l'Moshe Messina, and the pasuk we need is for something else. Now, before I just read the answer of the Gemara asked the same question before according to Rabbi Shmuel. He learned it out from the word rak, and the Gemara was explaining what does he need that pasuk for. And now the Gemara is asking according to Rabbi Akiva, which learns it out from the pasuk asham hu. Why doesn't the Gemara give the same answer as it gave before? That true, we have halacha l'Moshe Messina, that it shouldn't be brought in the mizbeach, but I need the pasuk to say that there's a mitzvah saseh. So the answer is very simple, because according to Rabbi Akiva, you can't say that there's any mitzvah saseh. The words asham hu does not indicate any mitzvah saseh. Rak is telling me only the oila and shlamim should be brought on the mizbeach, but not the chatas and asham. So that is a mitzvah saseh, because it's telling you what to do and you understand what not to do. So therefore, the Torah is telling you a mitzvah saseh regarding the chatas and asham. Asham, when it says in the pasuk asham hu v'hik deresim akayin asham hu, from that you don't learn out from that an exclusion which becomes the mitzvah saseh. So if it's not adding the mitzvah saseh, so then what is it adding? So therefore, the Gemara gives another answer. V'chi asekra lidrav huna, lidrav rather. what Rav said. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav as follows. Asham shenitik l'rayeh. So what happens with this carbon asham? The asham cannot be brought in the mizbeach. So now this asham has to be given over to a shepherd that takes care of it or whatever. It's left basically out to go and graze in the fields. So once it was already given over, once it was a nitik, it was separated, it was given over to to be left go out in the field, and v'shachtoi l'shem oila, and then he went and he shechted it as a oila after it went out into the field. Kosher. So b'di'eved now, after it was, even though it's supposed to be left to get a mum, and after it gets a mum, then the money is supposed to be brought as an oila. But what if he brought that animal itself as an oila? Kosher. It's going to be kosher. Why? So what do you learn out from that? Taimed, the nitik, only once it was left out to graze in the field, then I say that it's not an asham anymore. Now it becomes an oila. B'di'evid, if you bring it, it'll be an oila. Haloi nitik, but if it was not left out in the field yet to go graze, it's still an original asham. Loi. So then it's not going to be, it can't be brought as an oila. Even b'di'evid, if you bring it as an oila, it cannot be brought as an oila. That it remains a asham. It cannot be brought as an oila. So basically the answer the Gemara is saying is, yes, there is a general halacha l'Moshe Misinai that the leftovers of an asham or a chatas cannot be brought in the mizbeach. Chatas has to be left to die, and the asham has to be left out in the field to graze, and then the money of it is brought as an oila. But over here there's a different unique halacha that the Rav said, and that is that when it comes to this asham, there's a difference before you left it out to go into the field to graze, and after. Before, it's still an asham. And even with the yevet, if you brought it on the mizbeach, it remains an asham, it can't be considered an oila. Once it's left out to go into the field to graze, so then if you went and brought it as an oila, it will become oila. Nitik, it was already disconnected from being an asham. It's not being treated as a carbon originally of what it was left out to go in the field, now it becomes an oila. So now this halacha, this distinction of before it was left to go out in the field and after, that's what's learned out from the pasuk of Asham Hu, and which you don't know from the halacha l'Moshe Sinai.